Hi there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie noob nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink I have in sample form, and it's actually probably up there with one of the oldest samples that I own. It's a DeAtramentis ink, and it's a scented ink. Cherry. Now, I've always, my whole life, I've been very, very sensitive to smell. However, due to the health issues that I've had over the last year or two, I am horribly sensitive to smells. However, I think the only redeeming thing that kept me from having a migraine as I was using this was that this smell evokes some nostalgia. Did you ever have those like big fat markers as a kid, you know, where like the different colors had different smells? This smells like the red one, like the cherry scented red marker. But yeah, it's got a smell. So if you're sensitive to smells, something to be aware of. However, if you miss that smell, check this out. It's an interesting color. It's it actually kind of reminds me of like if you thinned out cherry juice. You know, it's not like bright, like, you know, like candy apple red cherry or like candied cherry red color. You know, it's almost more actual real cherry-ish color. So that was cool. Now, speaking of like candy apple red cherry color, this is a Knox Avacenna. Oops, sorry, that started to get unscrewed. In broad, and that was one of the pens that I used. And then I also used this Pilot Metropolitan with a Japanese medium. So those are the pens. Alright, let's check out some comparisons. Okay, so here's DeAtramentis Scented Cherry. And actually, the closest thing I think that I could find was Sailor Gentle Grenade. It's pretty similar. This one's maybe a little lighter, but it also shades more. And I doubt this will show up on camera, but it actually has this wonderful gold sheen. I love this ink. Sadly, they don't make this anymore. I'm very glad that I have a bottle. If you have a chance to try some, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful ink. Private Reserve Burgundy Mist. Very similar. However, the swatches don't really show up. They actually shade roughly the same amount. Mont Blanc's Bordeaux. And yes, Bordeaux, not Burgundy. This is from an old set of cartridges that I acquired when I was last in Italy, because apparently that Mont Blanc store didn't clear out their stuff very often. As you can see, it's a bit lighter, a little more candied cherry red color, but the darker parts in here do kind of match the lighter parts in here. And lastly, I thought I'd include KWZ's Cherry. It's not scented, and it's much more that sort of candy cherry color, but I kind of like it. Two cherries. Very different. Alright, let's check out the chromatography. Now, this is the chromatography as you're supposed to do it, where you put the line of ink and then instantly drop it in the water. Now, this is very common for a lot of DeAtramentis inks. They have this gray stuff at the base. You can definitely see where that drop was initially put, and I don't know if this will show up, but there's almost like a lavender right down here at the bottom, and then right up here at the top. So, line, gray, lavender, light pink, red, almost magenta right up there. Now, here's where I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it, but I do it anyway to amuse myself. The dot got darker. There's less of the gray creeping up. There's still some. Still got the hints of lavender, red, and magenta. There you go. Now I wanted to see what this ink could stand up against. And so water really got that red moving. The gray is still kind of there, but a lot of that ended up moving too. 1/3 bleach solution actually turned parts of it kind of yellow and other parts didn't move. Ammonia pen flesh really got the red moving, but the gray remained. And hydrogen peroxide, I don't know how I would describe that, so I won't. Alright, paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, it's a cherry color, you know, like a real, like, cherry, you know, if you're familiar with actually eating the fruit cherry. Looks like that. Nice shading. Now, despite this being one of my older inks, it actually behaved pretty well. If you've seen some of my other reviews, I talk about DeAtramentis syndrome, which is that the longer an ink is out of a vessel, so either a bottle or a vial, the worse its performance gets. This was pretty fresh. I think I started testing this, within a couple of hours of putting it in the pen. But it is a very old sample. I mean, this sample is probably maybe 2 years old now. So I was expecting very terrible things, and we don't really get it. So that Japanese medium took 17 seconds. The Knox Avacenna in broad took 25. But that's because this ink is kind of wet flowing. It is a little wet. I'd say it's a 6 out of 10. It's got some oomph behind it. But it's not out of control. We get lovely shading. Very nice. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. And again, kind of like we saw in that chromatography, the stuff that remains is actually kind of gray. And I actually didn't dye the page a whole lot, which I found fascinating. But a lot of the red goes away, so there's that. Next up is Fabriano Eco Qua. It's an 85 grams per square meter paper. It tends to be able to handle inks that other papers like Rhodia and Clairefontaine struggle with a little bit. Here, it looks fantastic. I mean, let's look at this scrubby. Look at all of this red. I mean, here we get this deep, like, maroon, but here we get a much lighter red. It's very nice. Now, the Japanese medium took 18 seconds to dry. The broad Knox took 25. Makes sense, because it is still kind of wet. But we get nice shading. We get a little bit of a halo effect. Not much, but a tiny bit. And it's very well behaved. No bleed, no feather, no spread. No echo, except maybe in the scrubby, but that was me really laying it on like an idiot, trying to see if I could make it sheen. I couldn't. There's no sheen. But always worth the effort. I test these things so you don't have to. Now, again, what's at the center is pretty gray, but it's also pretty there and pretty clear. Didn't feather, didn't explode. If you had to recover that, you could. It just wouldn't be that cherry red anymore. Now, next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. The Japanese medium took 15 seconds to dry. The broad Avacenna took 21. We don't get quite as much shading in the scrubby, but we do get some in the writing. Still quite nice there. Very well behaved here too. I said there's some near bleed in the scrubbies, but honestly that's as close as we get right there. That's it. And I said that's human error. That's from me trying to see if I could get anything to happen here. But there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All good in that regard. I did dye the page a tiny bit, and actually I was expecting this to be a little bit darker judging by the previous tests, but there is something there, and it is pretty clear. If you absolutely had to recover that, you probably could. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times, and it's very thin. Oh my god, this paper is very, very thin. And so the fact that this is actually a pretty dark red, we do get some echo. Okay, that was me. That was human error. I wanted to see if I could get it to sheen, because if an ink is going to sheen anywhere, it'll sheen on here. And I couldn't, so just ignore the scrubbies. But, I mean, that Knox is pretty broad, and it's a little wet by itself, and then you put a wet ink in it, and when it gets, putting a lot of ink down, it gets pretty dark. So, I mean, something to just be aware of. However, this Japanese medium, really not much echo. However, that Japanese medium took 23 seconds to dry. But, I mean, that's something this paper does. It really draws out dry times, and it was already a wet flowing ink, and you can just see that smear. Now, the broad Avacenna, I thought it was going to be dry by 35, but I stopped counting. It was probably something like 38. It wasn't that far off, but I usually stop counting at 30, so. But yeah, a little bit of a halo effect around the darkest parts. I don't know if this will show up. See those like two tiny little dots of sheen? It's like right here. That's it. That's all I could get out of it. Nothing else. The end. No more. But the shading in the writing is just really lovely. Yeah, so this paper loves to let ink slide away when you add water. This time, not so much, which is kind of impressive. There is some left. It's not super intense. It's not dark. It's not the same color. It's that gray. However, if you had to recover this, I think you could. And something is always better than nothing. Now, for the next 3 tests, I only use the Japanese medium, except to write the name. And this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. This stuff is terrible. So let's compare line width, shall we? here versus here. See that spread? Jeez. This is, if not a Japanese medium, then a European medium on the fine side. I mean, it's intense. And we have no more shading. We really don't. It gets intensely woolly. We get feathering. Now bear in mind, this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. Chances are you have something a little bit better than this. But still, it's not good. It's not the best showing. Took 1.5 seconds to dry. Well, it's, here, yeah. Yep. I mean, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it, and it's everywhere. It would not be comfortable at all to write on both sides of the page. Maybe with a drier writing Japanese fine, you might get something a little better, but considering how it's pretty much every centimeter this stuff touches. But again, you probably have something a little bit better than this awful paper. Now, more absorbent papers tend to draw the ink in, make it harder to wash out. And that's kind of what happened here. You see how clear and dark that gray is at the center? The very center of the writing? Look how that's almost darker than the writing above. I find that really amusing. But yeah, so the gray is not moving. It's very clear, very there, not feathering, not exploding. But that red, like we saw in the chromatography, that stuff is washing off. It actually almost makes it look like it's on fire. Or is wrapped in cotton candy or something. But anyways, if you had to recover that, you could. It would be messy, but you could recover it. Now next up is Mead Notebook Paper. It's very common for school children in the United States. This is the kind of Mead paper you might find in like a 5-star spiral notebook, not the kind you'd find in like a composition book or a lab book. That kind of paper feels more like newsprint. This stuff lately has been feathering a lot, and it kind of did, but actually, considering this is a very old sample of DeAtramentis ink, I was expecting crazy, crazy feathering. No, not really. It's like you get some woolliness. And you do get occasional feathers. Like look at the D in deal, and the N. But it's not insane. It's really not too bad. We do get this, because it is very thin paper. This is physically thinner than 20 pound. And this ink is kind of dark. So we do get, you can get the sense of something. However, the closest thing that was on here that nearly got to the other side was this scrubby. And that was me trying to see if I could get some shading. So I'd say that's human error. If you're reasonable, you'll probably be fine. Now this water test, this paper tends to freak out and do weird stuff when you add water. Here, really not too bad. I mean, again, look at that gray at the center. Very clear, very there, isn't moving. The red is kind of coming off, so again, it's like it's wearing a cotton candy suit or something, but yeah, if you had to recover that, you could. It would be a little messy, though. Now, lastly is Moleskine paper, which I hate because it's terrible. Full stop. It's terrible. It's terrible stuff. Honestly, as someone who understands paper, knows how it works and how it's made and whatever, they have absolutely no right to charge this much money for this paper. And it's infuriating. Anyways, here we go. Look at this. I mean, yes, it's a wet flowing ink, but it's a Japanese medium. I mean, like, look at this. Look at this texture. 5 seconds to dry is really woolly. You get a lot of feathers. It's just nasty looking. It's really nasty looking. And then, look at this. Because this, okay, so the 20 pound, you see how it's still kind of hazy? Like, none of it really gets super dark compared to, like, what the ink actually looks like when you're writing with it on that side. This, not so much. This gets really dark in a lot of little spots. And it actually rendered onto the page below in several spots. For some reason I didn't go back over and circle them afterwards. But yeah, so this made a mess. I mean, again, maybe with a dry writing, Japanese, fine. But if something is, you know, if you have to scenario that exact, honestly, find better paper. Because it's probably less expensive. Echo Qua is less expensive. Much less expensive. It's way better. Anyways, yeah, it's just nasty. And then this is what I mean by, like, some papers will freak out when you add water. This is what I mean. So this red is freaking out. It no longer looks like just a cotton candy bunny suit. It's like starting to overlap and do crazy things. And let's look at this gray at the center. It's doing something that none of the other papers did. You see how it's getting patchy? Like, you know, it's uneven. That's not good. That's really not good. Yeah, just bad combo. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if it was like a brand new ink sample, like cracked open the bottle fresh or something. I don't know. But honestly, I hate Moleskine. But yeah, this ink, really not bad. It's actually a very pleasant, sort of more of a true actual cherry fruit color. However, if you're very sensitive to smell, it's scented. However, if you're feeling nostalgic for those scented markers, yeah, it did pretty well on premium papers. On cheaper papers, could have been a heck of a lot worse. Maybe try something a little finer writing and a little drier. But yeah, Mead didn't do too bad. Chances are you have better copier paper than this crap. So yeah, there you go. For your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.